This is the sixth of the literary activism symposiums. Um, we started in 2004, December 14, December. Um, I, I, I hope you can hear what I'm saying. Um, and You can now visit the literary activism website, which came into being in August 2000, August last year, 2020, um, to get a sense of the background to this project, uh, to, to these um, to these symposia. Um, it was the symposiums were created in order to create a space for discussion about the creative process, about literature, the arts, whatever that might comprise, cinema, um, art, um, also translation, publishing to also the sciences, something which is doesn't fall into this kind of the domain of the creative process according to convention, but uh, is part of the cultural sphere, especially for scientists, uh, two of whom we've had in the past who are both writers or creative writers and scientists. Um, the aim was to create a mix of people at these interactions um, who would then be speaking about a theme and to each other um, in a way that reflected um, the urgency or immediacy of their thoughts about what it meant or means to be a practitioner at this point of time. And this, I'm sorry, the other category I should have included is the academic or the professor, the teacher. Um, so it seems that the world had kind of bifurcated in many ways. So over here, to simplify things, maybe oversimplify them, uh, um, but it's still a kind of persuasive for me uh, dichotomy um, for the writer bifurcated into um, the literary festival. For literature, it bifurcated into the literary festival and academic conferences. So the academic conference was a place where literature would be talked about within the parameters of um, the academic paper, um, uh, professionalized interchange, uh, often theme-based, uh, by a group of scholars who observed uh, what might be called, uh, in a slightly cliched, ugly phrase, scholarly protocols. Uh, a professionalized setting where professional proprieties were meant to be observed. One of the main sort of markers of observing professional propriety, I think, also had to do with the fact that the voice of the academic was a neutral one, or is a neutral one. It's not an I. The I doesn't really, generally speaking, come in. The I coming in is problematic and unprofessional, if not deprofessionalized. Um, and then on the other hand, there is the I playing itself out in a different way in the realm of the literary festival, where books are talked about, writers are talked about, literatures are talked about, but in connection to the latest book being published by that particular author. So there is the connection of of the plug, the pitch for the book, which has just come out. So the question was how to talk about things which were urgent to oneself as a writer or filmmaker or publisher or translator in a field that since the 90s, early 90s, was dominated by the market, and a domination which academia didn't seem to be taking cognizance of, uh, busy as it was with other things to do with um, dismantling the ideological uh, presuppositions of the literary. Um, how then to talk about what it meant to write beyond beyond talking about your latest book, what time of the day you woke up to write, whether you wrote on the laptop or with a ballpoint pen, how to go beyond that particular narrative, and how would academics go beyond their largely sort of, you know, um, themselves. I mean, a discourse which referred to each other as they spoke about, and each other's scholarly work as they spoke about a particular subject or theme. How to get beyond that into what was happening today. So it was to distance itself from the literary festival and um, from the professionalized academic setting that this space was created as one of the participants called it in a fringe academic space. I think that's a good way of putting it, a fringe academic space. This is a fringe academic space. We take advantage of the fact that this might be borne out by counting the number of academics in the audience today from Ashoka, where the kind of faculty is not completely aware that this is happening. So it's important that this fringe academic space exists, and that it's lucky for us that Ashoka is hospitable to this space. A lot has been happening in Ashoka University in the last week, and it's important that we all, including the people who set up Ashoka University, learn from this experience, as I think they want to. Otherwise, basic intellectual freedoms on which um, conventional pedagogy, uh, including things which this literary activism symposium is distancing itself from, like the academic conference, the intellectual freedoms that those things, the classroom and conferences are dependent on, not to speak of the intellectual freedoms that we rely on as a given when something like this happens, that those aren't threatened by factors which have existed in India, exist in somewhere everywhere now, but exist in India for decades now, but right now is far more focused, those factors are more focused on creating a climate of distrust and intimidation. So if you're in the business, sorry, I'm using that word metaphorically, of education and thinking, then one has to start out by realizing that this is a given and that one will have to deal with it, resist it, sidestep it in order to even exist. Because otherwise, not even the simplest form of teaching can exist. So, having said that, we will now proceed with this particular symposium, which happens to be on decolonization, uh, a theme which arises from my experience of things that were happening in the UK and observing what was going on in the US in the last, not just the last year or the last couple of years, but before then too, long before then. But those kind of developments have an impact on all of us, and they have their echoes over here as well, which one can devote another symposium to in the future, in terms of what constricts knowledge, what directs attempts to direct, control, and determine it.